Hey everyone, welcome to the show. It's great to be joined by Jenifer Richmond today, who is one of our amazing executive coaches. Welcome, Jenifer.
Thank you. Welcome.
So I know we've had a lot of conversations around this before, but I wanted to cover a few topics and themes that have been coming up and up. And the first one, I guess to start with, is where were senior leaders at the start of the pandemic?
This is really interesting because whilst you might expect leaders in a panic, etc., and in a really difficult place, that's actually not what I found. And I reached out to a lot of the leaders that I work with to say, can I offer you any crisis coaching? And I'll do it free of charge, given the situation. And to be honest, most of them didn't need it.
All right.
I think the reason is a lot of the lead senior leaders I work with, they have been operators in the past and they have worked through to senior roles. And actually, they're operators at heart and they love a crisis. You know? It's something to get their teeth into and they really, really embrace it. So I found that somebody even used the word excitement.
Wow.
Because it was something to get hold of and deal with.
Yeah, you're right. Some people, they're in their element, aren't they? When you know they're leading the ship or they're managing something and it's all hands on deck. And I guess a lot of people, that's their thing, right? That's where they feel they're adding real value. Interesting.
And they don't find it difficult. They absolutely don't find a crisis difficult because they know they're in the comfort zone almost with it. They can get a team together, make things happen and deal with it. And a lot of the people that work for them are real operators and they want to get their hands on and get it fixed and sort out the problem. I think the challenges come later when you've got to withdraw from or get past the immediate crisis and move forward.
Yeah. So which leads us nicely onto how to get out of that mindset and to looking forward. So we've talked a bit about like reacting. So crisis, everyone was talking about hustle, pivot, like just organize everything and all hands on deck. And now it's about moving forward, like thriving rather than just surviving.
And I think part of that is there's so much uncertainty. How do you know what the future is going to hold, and how do you plan around that, and how do you strategize when there's so much uncertainty? And I think that's what I've found that some people are struggling with, and it's easier to stay in crisis mode and stay in fixing mode rather than carve out the time that's needed to really think forward and think hard about the future.
Yeah, but have you found that, I mean, sure, not every leader is comfortable with being uncomfortable, because right now it's relentless. You've had, we're in our second lockdown. Most of Europe are in a second lockdown now. And it's been, as you said, crisis after crisis. Some people have thrived, but, have all leaders been comfortable with that? Or are people still trying to just grasp this, whether it's crisis mode or looking forward?
No, and I think you're right. This next phase, this next lockdown, I think it's taken things on. I think people are exhausted. They're exhausted with the relentlessness of what, and some people have been in furlough and whatever, but generally the senior leaders in the organization have not. They're the ones who have had to manage through this, and they've been managing through it for a really long time now, and that makes it really challenging because they've almost run out of energy with it, and that's where I think leaders do start to struggle.
It's tiring because I speak to a lot of leaders and they're getting up earlier or they're starting work earlier. It's going on later. The laptops come out in the evening. They might be doing it in front of Netflix. They lie in bed. The mobile phones come out, and it's just I know it just seems to be a never-ending circle. Not many people are taking holiday days or breaks, for fear of, I know if they're in a bigger company, for fear of maybe losing their job if they don't lead their department or organization, through this. Employees are really scared to take a break for fear of being the next one. So, to find themselves in a weird position.
I think that is a key difference, this holiday thing, because a lot of leaders that I know work incredibly hard, incredibly long hours anyway, and they're used to being on 24/7, and
Yeah.
they are managing that on an ongoing basis. And then they get a break and they take a week or 2 weeks out. And while some of them are still on during that break, a lot of them do take a proper break and recharge.
Yeah.
And because holidays, have been much more difficult this year and just not available to most people, then I think that recharge thing hasn't happened as much.
No.
And because the business has needed them, they'll probably continue and just on all the time. And then they do get to the stage where it's just exhausted.
Yeah. What would you recommend? I mean, is there anything you can do just to relax? Because I know it's not great to take a holiday at home, but I think it's almost treating yourself like an athlete. Like you need to look after yourself, so like sleep, diet, exercise, etc. Is there anything you're seeing that your clients are doing really well that could work?
I think the ones that are doing really, really well are ones that are taking time for themselves. They are taking time to, as you say, eat properly, exercise, sleep well, and actually take some time out for them. And when they take time out, and generally when I'm working with clients, that's their highest quality thinking time, is when they are just focused on them and in the session. And that's when I think they really, it helps them to recharge, to take a step back and to look at not just their work life and their work challenges, but their whole life, and to say, where am I spending my time? And am I spending that in the right place?
Yeah, no, definitely. And then once you've just taken that time, you can then start to get your mind in the place of looking forward and what's next, that growth phase. Interesting. Another thing that keeps coming up, and I know people probably tell you this in confidence and also to me as well, given what we both do. Do you think leaders are feeling very vulnerable at the moment? Is that a theme that you see?
Yeah, and I've no doubt. And I think we all have vulnerabilities from time to time. I think right at the moment, there's probably a heightened level of vulnerability. And it's very difficult for a senior leader to be vulnerable at work. Some who do that and do it very well actually gain a lot of credibility through it. But a lot of others just feel like they've got to be the strong one. They've got to be the one that that keeps it all together.
Yeah.
And they can't be vulnerable with their boss, because that's really difficult. They can't be vulnerable with their peers usually, because there's usually a pride thing going on there. And they can't be vulnerable with their teams, because they've got to be the strong one for the teams. So what I find is in that confidential space of executive coaching, that a leader has the opportunity to be vulnerable with an independent executive coach that's holding a confidential space for them. And that's where they get the chance to talk about the things that are really worrying them. And just in talking about that can help enormously.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because you see, the big theme I find at the moment is being authentic, and you do see some, certainly on LinkedIn and other platforms, some leaders going completely the other way, and just being so open and say, I'm really struggling. This is how I've dealt with it. So it's interesting. You see, I see these kind of polar opposites almost, and historically, you just don't want to show any weakness, but I think right now, people appreciate it because everyone's going through the same thing.
Absolutely. And I think just if you ask yourself, if you've heard a leader that you know or a peer that you know open themselves up a bit or show a bit of vulnerability, what have you thought of them? And I bet you've not thought any less of them. I bet you've thought more of them.
Yeah, it's hard. It's so hard to say to one of your team members, I'm really struggling right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then that's when you really build, I think, the confidence and the trust, and because we're all in it together, aren't we? Going through, and
absolutely,
it's important. How have you found the role of exec coaching in the current climate? Because again, exec coaching, I guess, mirrors the challenges in business in real life. And have you personally had to adapt your coaching style for this this current time?
I wouldn't say I've had to adapt my style, because I guess in any coaching session, your style adapts to what the coachee needs in the moment anyway. So I'm a great believer in, when I meet with a client, I meet them where they are. And I might see a very different person from one session to the next, depending what they're dealing with in the moment. And it's about meeting them where they are and working with them and their agenda. And I guess what I'm finding more in the current climate is clients are valuing that ability to take time out, because they're really struggling to take the time out to do the thinking without having it as a slot in the diary. So having that time to meet with a coach, to meet with me, to step back, to be able to look more objectively at their situation, and to have someone help them step out of their own map of the world, because every leader is in their sense of things, the way they see things. And when they talk to me and I can bring a different perspective, or challenge them to think from a different perspective, they will see things differently, gain new insight. And that's where the real, I think the real value comes from.
Definitely. How have you found coaching virtually?
Absolutely fine. And really, a lot of clients were quite resistant to start with. So some of the clients that I've always worked with face-to-face, they didn't want to continue virtually initially. They said, once this is over in a few weeks, we'll have our last couple of sessions face-to-face. And of course, it didn't last. It lasted more than a couple of weeks. So after we got back another month or so, and they realized it was going to be long-term, they decided to continue virtually, and we're really surprised at how effective it was.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's great. Every exec we work with has a coach or a sounding board or a combination of the two, because there's so many different things going on right now, and it's just nice, as you said, just to take a step back and work on yourself a little bit, and then you can go back in. So it's important. Thank you so much for joining me. Some great insights, and I look forward to another one.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lewis. Bye-bye.